with that, my name is Jude Hamib, Program Manager here at GFP USA, and I'm joined with my colleague here, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. Good morning or good evening, based on where you are. I'm Lindsay McLean-Opio, and I'm the Executive Director of Generations for Peace USA.
So before we get started, I wanted to give a huge shout out and thank you to our partners, Laureus USA, Fight for Children in DC, and Generations for Peace Global. Your support made this program possible, and we really appreciate all of the support and everything else. And then also, gonna give it over to the PBA cohort. So we're joined by five organizations, two from DC, three from Chicago. So we can start with JTCC, with your name, your role, organization, and then we'll just go down the line.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ava Todd. I'm the Community Outreach Manager at JTCC in College Park, Maryland, and I'm here with my colleague, Olivia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia Medina, and I'm the Outreach Associate at JTCC.
Hi, my name is Kiara Johnson. I am the Programs Analyst here at So Kids Store, and I'm joined with my boss, Glenda.
Hi, everyone. I'm Glenda Smith. I'm the Executive Director of So Kids Store in DC.
Hello, I'm Jerry Park at Little Friends for Peace, substituting for my wife, MJ, in Washington, and wondering what JTCC is.
JTCC stands for Junior Tennis Champion Center. So we're a nonprofit tennis center in College Park, Maryland.
Thank you.
I'm Noah Viner from Chicago Adventure Therapy. I'm our Gear and Facilities Coordinator.
Hi, everyone. My name is D'Angelo Johnson. I am the Director of Operation and Recreation at Breakthrough Urban Ministries.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mikhail Kendrick. I am the High School and Post-Secondary Coordinator at Breakthrough Urban Ministries, along with D'Angelo.
Hello, everyone. I'm Annalise Gallagher. I'm the Youth Director of the Chicago Lions Charitable Association, which is a rugby club in Chicago.
Nice. All right, thank you everybody for the introductions. So the people you heard from is our PBA cohort. So yeah, we'll begin with the agenda. So today we'll present the progress of the PBA, some lessons learned and key takeaways from the program. We'll begin with an overview of GFP USA and the 2024 PBA. You'll hear from the five organizations as they give an overview in their presentations of some of the assignments that they did and some of the ways they've applied lessons learned into their existing programming. And then we'll have a 30-minute panel discussion. We invite folks in the audience to also participate by posting questions in the chat. And we'll try to get to them as quickly as we can. And lastly, we're ending with a quick evaluation poll and close. So please take a couple minutes to also complete that as well. Yeah, go to the next slide. Thank you. So some housekeeping things before we get started. If you haven't done so already, please write your name, your role, organization, and location in the chat. We are recording the session, and there's a live transcript option available with captions if needed. If you have the most up-to-date Zoom, just click the CC button at the bottom. And please keep an eye out on the chat as well. We'll communicate through that throughout the showcase. And that's also where you can continue writing questions, any thoughts that you have throughout the call. So yeah, now I'll hand it over to Lindsay for an overview of GFP USA.
Thank you so much, Drew. Hello again, everyone. I'm Lindsay, the Executive Director of Generations for Peace USA. And by a quick show of hands, who here is new to GFP, Generations for Peace USA? I know I'm seeing some new faces. Perfect, thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you all here, both new and old. And for those that this is the first time, I hope this is the first of many interactions with us. I'm going to take you through a few minutes of overview of who we are and what we do. Generations for Peace USA is a 501c3 nonprofit in the United States with roots in international peace building and development. We were founded by Generations for Peace Global in 2012. And a really big shout out to all of our global colleagues who are joining on this call from Amman, Jordan. It's 6 p.m. there, the end of a long work day, and they're choosing to spend their evening here with us, and we're really grateful. Today, Generations for Peace USA is a US-based team with staff and board members from across the country, And we are united in our commitment to applying GFP's global model of participatory community-led peace building to bridge divides, strengthen communities, and build peace in the United States. Generations for Peace USA has 3 key thematic priorities. They're 1, in civic engagement and youth leadership, 2, bridge building, and 3, violence prevention. Under the first one, civic engagement and youth leadership, we emphasize strengthening young people's capacities and confidence to address issues that they're most passionate about changing. Under bridge building, we bring people together across identity-based divides to listen to understand each other, but also to take action together on issues affecting safety and belonging in communities. And under 3, violence prevention, we aim to work as upstream as possible in conflict dynamics, strengthening individual and collective protective factors and addressing root causes of violence. And we touched on all 3 of these priorities in one way or the other through the 2024 Peacebuilding Academy, which Drew will share more on in a minute. And lastly, from me on this overview of GFP USA, we use different tools to support our mission, and we call them vehicles for peace building. The 2024 Peacebuilding Academy was focused on our flagship approach of Sport for Peace. And Sport for Peace is a flexible tool that can be used to transform conflict and violence in communities. It was originally developed by Generations for Peace Global 16 years ago, and since then it's been used around the world, including in the United States since 2019. It primarily uses sport-based games to achieve peace-building outcomes. It can also use drills or adapted official sport code. So for example, through the PBA and other programs, Sport for Peace has been integrated into soccer and rugby and tennis and other sports. Sport for Peace relies on team dynamics and cooperation to achieve shared goals. But for us, the goal is not winning the game. The goal is to change attitudes, behaviors, and relationships of participants that are contributing to conflict and violence in their communities. And Sport for Peace is effective in building towards what we call expressions of change. And these are simply indicators that tell us that Sport for Peace is working and having the intended peace-building outcomes that we'd like to see. So this includes indicators around building trust and acceptance, or developing respect, ensuring inclusion, and ensuring greater cooperation amongst and between different parties to a conflict. Later, you're going to get to hear directly from 5 youth sport organizations from DC and Chicago. Those are the ones that introduced themselves at the beginning of the call. But you'll hear how they've integrated Sport for Peace principles and practices into their great existing work with youth through the Peacebuilding Academy. But first, I will hand over to Drew to tell you more about what is the Peacebuilding Academy. Over to you, Drew.
Thank you. So first thing, what is the Peacebuilding Academy? So the Peacebuilding Academy is an initiative by GFP USA to provide peacebuilding training, mentoring, and technical assistance to organizations in select US cities. This year was 2024 was DC and Chicago, to help them better address issues of conflict and violence in their communities and strengthen youth resilience to violence. So we do this through 3 key activities. The first is to assess and analyze the peacebuilding technical assistance needs of the organizations in the PBA. So that included, in the beginning, a learning needs assessment, and then a discovery and scoping call where we decided who was going to be in the cohort, who we thought would work well together, and who we thought would benefit from the academy. Baseline and endline surveys for staff. And then also we did each organization did a community needs assessment and conflict analysis, which we'll talk about in the next slide, but that served as a big bulk of the program. A second key activity was providing individualized technical assistance to the PBA partners. So that included our virtual training. So we had 12 hours of training total for each organization. We had 1 4-hour training per month, January, February, and March. And that was in partnership with GFP Global, with some of their curriculum, and with our former colleague, Sophia Ibn Garba, who's amazing. We covered things like conflict and peace theory, My Community Part 1, 2, and 3, which is the community assessment and the conflict analysis, or the CNA and CA, and then a Sport for Peace section, which was another big bulk of our programming. And we also had some peer exchanges as well in that, including like breakout rooms and different assignments where folks could connect outside of just the training aspect. We also had one-on-one mentoring support. So every 2 weeks with each organization, beginning in March, We had just check-ins every couple weeks to talk about lessons learned, some of the homework assignments, and some of the ways to apply lessons learned to programming. And then we ended with youth check-in surveys that concluded in July, just to get some more insight on how the program was affecting the youth that they were serving. And the third key activity is to nurture a sustained community of organizations locally, nationally, and internationally. We did that through our monthly sharing and learning calls with other Peacebuilding Academy members. So starting in April, and then we had our last sharing and learning call in August once a month. We have sharing and learning calls for about an hour just to talk about lessons learned and different things, and how we can just learn and kind of trade off ideas from each other. There's a virtual exchange between us and GFP Global, of course, through the training aspect and the curriculum. And then also we utilize what's called the Global Mighty Network. So it's a social media platform where the cohort can join, where we house recordings, homework assignments, mentoring call overviews, and things like that. And then lastly, the participatory planning of next year's Peacebuilding Academy and also this showcase event, planning it together. So to reiterate, the main purpose of the Peacebuilding Academy was to equip organizations with skills, knowledge, and support necessary to effectively address conflict and violence in their communities while using sport as a tool. So yeah, the big bulk of the assignments were the community needs assessment and conflict analysis that sort of served as a reference point and base for how we would take lessons learned to apply to existing programming. So the community needs assessment is it's a process used to identify and evaluate the needs, assets, and priorities of a specific community. So it involves collecting data, identifying needs, asset mapping, and engaging stakeholders. So what that looks like in the data collection aspect is gathering info from various sources. That includes surveys, interviews, focus groups, public records, and existing research. And so everyone has sort of a different methodology when doing this. Identifying the needs is also important in community assessment. So analyzing the data and identifying gaps or deficiencies in resources and services, or opportunities that negatively impact a community's well-being as well. And also asset mapping, so identifying the strengths, resources, and assets within the community that can be leveraged to address its needs moving forward. And this includes engaging stakeholders, so involving community members and different leaders, and also youth as well in some of these processes. And lastly, developing an action plan is what's important for the community assessment. So after identifying the strengths, creating a plan to identify the needs, and using the existing assets and resources. So this can include also designing new programming, enhancing existing services, and also advocating for policy changes. So after that, we went to the conflict analysis. So what is a conflict analysis? It's essentially just a systematic study of profile, causes, and actors of dynamics of conflict. So it involves identifying and understanding the underlying and immediate factors that contribute to conflict. So the parties involved, potential impact of different interventions, and the goal is to design like a deeper understanding to implement strategies and prevent and manage and resolve conflicts effectively. So the key components of a conflict analysis are the conflict profile, so doing an overview of its history, the context, the nature of the conflict, and that includes its location, duration, and the intensity. Causes of conflict, so examining the root causes, so this can be structural inequalities, historical grievances, any immediate triggers like political events or economic shocks that can sort of fuel conflict in that way. And then identifying the different actors in the conflict is also important for conflict analysis. So who are the main folks involved in the conflict? This includes state and non-state actors, and then what are their interest, capacities, and relationships with each other. And then also the dynamics, so analyzing interactions between those different actors, and then how the conflict evolves and how those factors sustain or escalate the conflict. So yeah, in short, the conflict analysis is essential for essential tool for peace building. It helps organizations and representatives develop more targeted and effective interventions to address conflict and promote lasting peace. So yeah, now we move into the PBA core presentations. We'll hear a little bit more from the organizations about their CA, their CNA, any lessons learned, and how it's being applied to programming. So we will begin with JTCC, or Junior Tennis Champion Center. And yeah, I'll give it to them.
Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Olivia, and I'm the Outreach Associate at JTCC, and this is our final presentation. We can go on to the next slide. Thank you. So first up is our community needs assessment, and we use 2 different groups to evaluate and survey for our representative sample. And one of them was Beltsville Community Center, and these children in the community center are part of our Game On program, which is an outreach site that we identify kids to train at the site for 10 weeks, and they will eventually become part of our Future Champs program. And then we chose our high performance champs as another part of our representative sample because they are at the very end of our pathway and they are what we want the outreach kids to one day become a part of. Next slide, please. So for the Beltsville Community Center kids, since they are elementary school aged, I decided to adapt the CNA into the My Community activity. So I can gauge what they're thinking about their community, but also engage with them in a way that makes sense to them. And many of the children express their love for playing with their friends and doing some sort of sport activity, such as soccer, bike riding, or swimming. This student, Natasha, she drew her neighborhood Cherry Hill, and she described that she loved playing with her best friend Malachi in her backyard, and she drew her neighborhood, which is her houses and a bunch of her backyard space. And this is very representative of what Beltsville, Maryland looks like because it's very suburban and it gives a picture of how these kids live in Beltsville. Next slide, please. And then for our full-time champs, since they are they are a little bit older, we decided to give them the true community needs assessment as a homework assignment. And we learned that they come from places in DC metro areas, such as Arlington and Riverdale Park, Maryland. And they saw issues in their community, such as unhoused people and pollution. And it really shows that they care about their community and the way that others live in their community. Yeah, and next slide, and I'll give it to Ava.
Thanks, Olivia. Hey, everyone. My name's Ava. The next piece is our conflict analysis. So Olivia and I started tracking the types of conflicts that we were seeing at our community sites. So as she mentioned, we go to various schools and recreation centers within 10-minute drive, 20-minute drive of our home location in College Park, Maryland. And we started looking at what kind of conflicts were happening when we were trying to teach tennis in those communities. So as you can see, most of the conflicts that we had on here, which is a little snapshot of our tracker, were relational. Mostly the students were having issues because they weren't getting along with each other. They had some friendships with people in the group, others they weren't so much friends with, and that was causing conflict within the group. We also saw a couple of structural issues where the students were not happy with the structure in place where coaches were telling them what to do. And that led to not being able to get through the lesson as quickly as we wanted. You can go to the next slide. So the lessons we learned from these 2 activities and the rest of our participation in the cohort, it's critical to get to know our community and their wants and needs, which we started to do through the CNA. And participatory learning is a key tool to address the kinds of structural and relational conflicts that we were seeing. So if we can get the students to be more actively involved in their learning, that might help to resolve some of those types of conflicts that were arising. And overall, just understanding that conflict in our community is inevitable, but it's how we respond to it and finding creativity in the ways that we respond that is the most important piece. And that is everything. Thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you. Next up is So Kids Soar.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kira Johnson. I'm here with Glenda Smith, and this is our presentation. So before we go talk about our CNA, we want to look at why we do what we do. A little quick summary. So in 1973, the Rehabilitation Act was passed, and that laid the groundwork for the 1990 Disability Act, which helps people of all disabilities have equal access to all the services and rights. So the next slide shows our mission. So Kids Soar is a nonprofit organization providing life-changing programs that empower youth with physical and developmental disabilities to strive on, achieve, and realize their potential. We enable participants to soar through a suite of adaptive programming through our athletic, recreational, and skill building activities. And I'll turn it over to Glenda to explain more.
So our programs we have three. Our first are adaptive clinics, which are held every month for youth with disabilities. And it's a chance for them to try different activities from tennis with the JTCC to art, to prom, both recreational and athletic, like we just mentioned. At the end of the year, we also have a holiday program where we have all of our participants give back to the community. So they'll wrap presents for homeless youth, among other philanthropic activities, just to show that their disability does not hold them back from achieving their potential. And then finally, we have a vocational building program. It's a 3 to 4 month curriculum called Your Path to Success. And through all the programming, we have at least a 1-to-1 volunteer to participant ratio. So mentorship is very important throughout all of our programming. We also try to advocate wherever we can. And two of the things that we've done in the past and currently, one of our past board members, Teresa Fox, she helped her brother who has a disability argue for larger bathrooms in Maryland. So she helped pass some legislation for that. And then we are currently in the Fight for Children Institute, which is how we're part of this Peacebuilding Academy. And we are working on getting a grant through DC that will help benefit and provide lots of funds to all youth sports programming. So next slide.
So here are some of the lessons that we learned from the training we did from January to February. So it forced us to take a step back and look at the big picture of how our organization is run. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. It shows our theory of change. This is our theory of change that we believe makes our mission work. If we provide free programming for youth with disabilities where they can try new activities alongside their peers and mentors, then we can empower them to strive, own, achieve, and realize their goals because they will learn social engagement and build confidence through their programs. The next slide shows our achievements. We wrote our own conflict analysis. We updated our community needs assessment. Our main needs were transportation, accessibility of services, language barrier, and then setting up participants for future success. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. The last thing I wanted to do was no slideshow is complete without data. It is my job after all. We wanted to at So Kids Soar, we want to measure a level of social engagement and confidence level before and after each in-person clinic. We also have, so if you go to the next slide, then it shows the ethnicity of all of our participants as of 2023, as 18% of our population is Hispanic, and we address that through making all our registrations and surveys in Spanish.
And this was part of the community needs assessment. So we learned that there's cultural conflict because we were not addressing the other languages that might be spoken with our families.
Yes, thank you, Glenda. If you go to the next slide, we also wanted to we wanted to include our participants, even those who are nonverbal, in our surveys. So we started doing picture surveys. We took the idea from JTCC. We borrowed a few of the elements from it. And this is a graph of some of the of one of our events from prom. So notice how most of them were coming in like neutral, and then everyone came in at the end either liking it or loving it, which it shows. And then that is our presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you to Drew and Lindsay for leading us through the way, and thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. I love that. So yeah, now it's time for Noah at Chicago Adventure Therapy.
Hi, I'm Noah again. I work for an organization called Chicago Adventure Therapy. Yeah, you can click to the next slide. So it was really important for me, it felt like, to look at our community, and you can see all these people that we have included, but like, who are the people that are not included? And the big things that I noticed were our biggest bottleneck for inclusion was our ability and our limited capacity. And so I really wanted to look at why there is a need for access in Chicago and wanted to look more into the history of it. But before I do that, I want to look at like what role we currently sit in. Do you mind doing the next slide? So at Chicago Adventure Therapy, we run programming in a way that the only thing people have to do is bring themselves. If they show up to it, we will bring everything from the clothing to the gear that they need to do the activity, and we will run a program with them in a multitude of ways. Next slide. So then I wanted to go out and look at the community. And so I talked to both participants, I talked to staff members, because a lot of our staff members were also former participants. And some of the biggest issues that we run into is the gatekeeping of knowledge. And then as you look into the history of it, it's the privatization of land and water in the state of Illinois. Next slide. And in Illinois, we began going down a rabbit hole of, as the industrialization, especially in Chicago, began to happen, large companies would buy up the green and blue spaces of Chicago and make them inaccessible or heavily polluted so that people wouldn't use them. And that has begun a large cycle of people feeling fear to use them or not having the knowledge to use these spaces. Though there are organizations that in recent history have been looking to open up the access of these spaces and make them clean for people. As you can see, the Hazel Johnson, Open Lands, and the Southeast Environmental Task Force. So some of the conflicts that we face are, especially in our communities, we have rival gangs, we have people who are religious, but people who are also in the LGBTQ+ community. And then we make a space where people can talk about that. We also make a community that allows for people to lower that barrier of gatekeeping and to gain the knowledge for themselves and to go out and bring this information into their community without necessarily having to use us. Our vision for moving forward is to not be the bottleneck and to share our knowledge and resources so that we can continue to spread this wealth of knowledge of how do you do these adventure sports in Chicago to all of Chicago without us having to be the ones running the program. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you so much, Noah. Yeah, now we move on to Breakthrough with D'Angelo and Co.
Hello, you all. As I mentioned before, my name is Mikhail from Breakthrough Urban Ministries. I am the high school and post-secondary coordinator, along with D'Angelo Johnson, who is doing recreation. He's the director of recreations and our operations at the building. So we can just pull forward real quick. All right, so we want to start off with our conflict analysis overview. And before I get really into that, I feel like the political context of Chicago is really important to kind of understand what's going on, or to kind of just make it a little bit more nuanced. So I remember that Chicago had received nearly $2 billion from the federal government for COVID-19 relief. And the mayor at the time, Lori Lightfoot, had spent 130 million, on programs centering affordable housing, mental health, violence prevention, and youth employment programs. 280 million went to CPD, which was largely used for overtime and enhanced security during the November election, so of 2020. So, however, since then, which I believe the funding might have been given out on March of 2021, Chicago has only spent 29% of our budget. So with that in mind, I think it is also worth noting that neighborhoods like ours, which is East Garfield Park, have been heavily policed. So I believe that even though, you know, one of our community needs has been for safety, the amount of police doesn't particularly help that issue. So just getting back to our conflict analysis overview, as big as our community is, we thought it was best to conduct our CNA through a survey. And participants have lived in East Garfield Park for at least 3 years and at a max of like 30 years. And throughout looking at our list, the median was about 11 years. So at least that middle person will have at least lived a decade in our community. And throughout all of our responses, we found that 59% of responders believe our community is facing an issue of violence and or safety. And 45% of responders believe that our community is heavily influenced by violence. So I think that is worth noting that, I think that is worth noting that violence and conflict are not the same, and they shouldn't be looked at as the same thing. But I think that conflict arises when we do have different resources that we're battling for. So it's no secret that East Garfield Park is a victim of food insecurity. We are registered as a food desert. So I think that it is very possible that those resources or the lack of resources causes us to sort of butt heads in our community. But we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, and just to add on, Breakthrough provide a holistic of service from youth education and development, from housing economic opportunities. We also have a fresh market as well. So this survey was compiled of like all participant across all Breakthrough program. So we didn't really get the youth we wanted, like the age demographic like we directly serve. So our age range for this survey was from 27 to 60 years old. And below are just like the zip codes areas, mainly East Garfield Park area was where most of our participants that we got our surveys from. So we just used the email list service that we all have access to just blast this out. So our goal was to get more like youth voices, but we more so got the feedback from that general population of the area and like other program spaces. We can go to the next slide. So through our community needs assessment, some things that we found out was just, we asked, what are some resources that are lacking in the community? And, a lot of people said food and healthcare, employment opportunities was one. We also asked questions such as like, how much is the community is shaped by violence? And we see a large number individual responding to like from on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most like their community is shaped by violence. And then we also asked the question, what resource to you is the most important? A lot of people said safety is a huge important resource to them as well. And just going back to Kel, that like he mentioned in the conflict analysis, how we found the data on Chicago and how much, the city is really invested in police and just how individuals still feel unsafe in their community. We can go to the next slide. And these were just some common things that we found out throughout the survey, just as like, safety and violence being an issue. We also asked the question, people like, why do you continue to reside or work in East Garfield Park? And a lot of reason people say it's because of the love for the community or they was born and raised. So, they didn't want to like leave the area. Next slide.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys sharing. All right, so now we are going to move to with Chicago Lions.
Hi.
Hey,
Again, I'm Annalise Gallagher from the Chicago Lions. I'm the director of youth rugby, where we provide access to sport through rugby for ages 4 through seniors in high school.
Thank you. Yep. So we have a few questions prepared. So Anna is joining us after traveling. So I thank you, Anna, again for doing this on such a tight schedule. We really appreciate it. But yeah, I'm just gonna ask you a few questions. So for some background, An was the only participant in the program who was working with a high school aged youth at Chicago Lions. So that's something that was kind of unique about them joining the PBA. So yeah, that's the first question. On is, as the only person working with the high school aged youth, how was your experience in the PBA?
The experience was great. It was difficult though, being a lot of our PBA meetings happened during school time. When we first registered for the PBA, it was looking for, input from individuals working with the organization between 17 and 24. Well, most of my kids are, within, 17 to 24 because I have a large group of high schoolers. And so I had gone to one of the young men who's been in our program since he was about 8. And he was a junior in high school, and he is also one of my active mentors in our organization, and said, would you be interested in doing this with me? And he was very on board with it, and we're like, okay, great, let's go ahead, we'll put in our application and see what happens. And when we were selected, we were all for it. We thought, okay, we got this. I'll take some of the meetings, he'll take some of the meetings, we'll do them together. But unfortunately, with a high school schedule and an athletic schedule, it was very difficult for him to be hands-on participant in the program. So we had kind of made the decision that he would still be involved as much as possible, but that because of, junior year schoolwork and his training schedule, he wasn't going to be able to do a lot of the interactions with the rest of the cohort. So he and I would do things offline, talk about our how we want our organization to move forward using all of the information that we were learning through the PBA. And I think he has been a great asset as somebody who is also receiving those changes that we're making, to be able to give feedback directly, where he went through the trainings that we did on Saturdays, and then as we were implementing things, he was able to give direct feedback of, I think this is working, I think we should change it this way. So having that direct feedback was paramount for how I'm looking at growing our organization going forward. Oh, Drew, you're on mute.
Thank you, sorry. No, that's amazing. That actually leads to the next question. So thinking about the mentoring model that you have at Chicago Lions, what were your biggest takeaways when thinking of mentoring models there, and thinking about youth sort of leading those mentoring models?
At the Lions, we do what I call a trickle-down coaching philosophy, where for my middle school and high school kids, we have current senior players, so adults who are currently playing rugby, who are certified as coaches, who have been trained as coaches. This way, the age gap is not as great as if I were hiring individuals in my demographic and age range. These are young adults who are, early on in their careers, have really good feedback for mentorship, have newer knowledge of what going off to college is like, especially from kids coming from our neighborhoods. A lot of my coaching staff are from the neighborhoods that we serve. They come from all different backgrounds, men and women, and it has just been, an imperative, something that you just can't go out and buy when you're hiring. And over the last 3 years, we have implemented that going into our even younger group, our 4 to 10-year-old rookies group, where I go to our high school players and talk to them and see who is interested in doing this, who understands, that from the time you start being a mentor until these kids essentially graduate high school, you are a person that they're going to come to. And the change that I have seen in especially my young men who are coming out and learning to be mentors and learning to be coaches, and you watch them, these 18-year-old young men walking across the field holding the hand of this little kid that they met 5 minutes ago in the first couple of weeks of practice, and your heart melts because you see that connection. And the young man that I'm thinking about in particular, he was a senior when he started mentoring. And one night after practice, he was upset, and he and I sat down to talk about it. He's like, I'm looking at our rookies coach and I'm bailing on him. And I had to explain to him that he's not bailing on him, that he'll be back at holidays and over the winter when we have programming, that he can come in and help again. and that he's going to be there, and he actually gets to watch these kids grow up in the program that he didn't get to be involved with until he was in high school. And that he will always be one of those people that, especially the older children in that program, can reach out to and talk to. And I've talked to him about, when he does graduate, if he's coming back to Chicago and he wants to continue, he can then be one of those mentors at the high school level where these kids will be and coach at that level. And part of my deal with these young people is that the club will pay to have them certified as coaches because they've put in their volunteer time to get their high school volunteer hours. But in the end, I want to give them that opportunity to not only leave our organization as accomplished young people in our sport, accomplished young people in academics, but to give them that next step that wherever they go, they have gone through a training to be a certified coach, which then as a player brings you to an elevated status with your coaching staff as you go on, because you're then certified to run different types of practices. So not only are you a coach, but as you grow in your next program, you can be a mentor and an assistant coach. And that gives them more opportunities, gives them an opportunity to get paid for what they love to do, which is, play rugby. And it all trickles back into the club as these young people go off to college. And if they decide to come back to Chicago, they come back to our club. If they go all on elsewhere in the US or internationally, they have that basis that they know that they can go out, they can play for a club, but they also can give back to whatever club they decide to go with, which I think is really important, especially for our young people coming from the west side of Chicago, where they may or may not have had mentors like themselves growing up. And now they know that they have made this impact on these young people, 4 to 10 years old, our middle school and high school kids. And it's this whole, growing our exterior community through the mentorship of seeing that these young people are going off and getting scholarships. They're going off and they are, taking that next step that their parents may not have had that opportunity. And their siblings may not have had that opportunity, but thankfully through rugby, they're all getting this opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. So for the sake of time, we're gonna take our last question and move into the panel questions or the panel section. But yes, thank you to all of the organizations for sharing and doing your presentations. Highly appreciated. But yeah, so now we're going to transition into a panel featuring the rest of the cohort. So we've created some questions and talking points together, and we encourage any questions or thoughts from the audience that people have during the panel to please write it in the chat, and we'll address it throughout the panel. But before we get started, let's just do a quick reintroduction of ourselves. So again, Drew Rahmi, Program Manager here at Generations for Peace USA, and I am based in Chicago. And I will pass it on to JTCC, and we'll follow the same order.
Ava Todd, Community Outreach Manager at JTCC.
Hi, I'm Olivia Medina, and I'm the Outreach Associate at JTCC.
I'm Kiera Johnson. I'm the Programs Analyst.
I'm Glenda Smith, the Executive Director of So Kids Soar in DC.
I'm Noah Viner. I'm the Gear and Facilities Coordinator at Chicago Adventure Therapy.
Hi, my name is D'Angelo Johnson. I am the Director of Operation and Recreation at Breakthrough.
Hello, my name is Mikhail Kendrick. I'm the High School and Post-Secondary Coordinator at Breakthrough.
And I'm Annalise Gallagher. I'm the Director of Youth Rugby for the Chicago Lions.
All right. Thank you for everybody for introducing yourselves. So yeah, now it's time for our panel. So I'm going to start with question 1. Again, please feel free to send any questions or thoughts through the chat, and we'll address them throughout the panel. So first question, and I want to hear from 2 to 3 folks. What did you hope to gain from the PBA when you first applied to join?
I can start. So my hope was to just really connect with other organization within Chicago and DC and just learn like, what are they doing at their organization, how we can collaborate together. My other insight was like, to gain um, information and skills on about promoting nonviolence within the organization, especially like being in youth sports and how does that work.
Hmm.
I would
Yeah,
have,
go ahead.
sorry. I would agree that I was very interested in seeing how other organizations, not only in Chicago but in DC, cope with the exterior issues that our young people, for us, our young people would face, and how different organizations approach those issues. And I think that I have learned quite a bit through this experience. Go ahead, Glinda.
Yeah, I was just going to echo the same sentiments. I think first we were excited just to connect with other organizations working in the same space, and commiserate about the challenges together. But as you saw from our presentation, I think one of the biggest takeaways from us, we weren't expecting to really adapt some of our survey methodology or adapt some of the other things people were doing at other organizations into our own survey methodology. So it was a great learning experience, not just from GFP, but also from our colleague organizations.
Thank you for sharing. On that note, Glenda, so lead to this next question here, sort of falls in line with what was just said. Was there any particular insight or idea shared by another organization during the monthly calls that inspired you or shifted your approach? And how did you apply it in your context? I'd love to hear too for this particular question, JTCC, Chicago Adventure Therapy, and then also Silk Soar, just because you guys traded off of each other's ideas a lot with some of your assignments. And yeah, just what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. I'm happy to go first, but we, as you saw from the presentation, Kira, so eloquently put that we had taken, we realized culturally, we weren't doing enough just with our language, with what we were asking. We were asking everything in English, and we should have been considering all the other families that we work with that are not English speaking. And one of the biggest things that we never considered was just that we have a lot of nonverbal participants that we work with. So what we took away from JTCC was that they had put together, as you saw from their presentation, the idea that they had their participants draw out their community. So we thought, how could we incorporate pictures? Because some of our nonverbal participants, they work best with images instead of just obviously speaking or writing it out. So that was one of the direct ideas that we had learned from JTCC. But I think through all of our conversations, it was also nice just hearing that it was just getting survey responses is hard sometimes. So just learning from each other, like what were the ways outside of giving out incentives, what were the other ways that people tried to generate more survey responses from their community?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
I can go next. I felt like the bit that I took away from so many other organizations in this and the PPA was access and the way people were looking at access in different ways. And I think it allowed me to look so much like it allowed me to look inward to our organization and look at how we can increase access for our participants, because every single other group was looking at access in totally different ways. And I think that it's very easy to get locked in on, oh, we are an adventure sports group, then we can look at just how do we get access to green and blue spaces. But then Breakthrough looks at it of how can East Garfield Park get access to food or to safety. or short kids score with people with varying levels of ability. And I think that is what I took away from that was to always be looking for access and to look to move access forward in your community.
Yeah, I think for sure.
You want to go, Ava?
You can go.
Okay. Yeah, I was just gonna bounce off of both of what Noah and Glenda said. I feel like I've learned through the cohort that we, as nonprofit sports organizations, we all have very similar missions and very city and similar audiences that we serve. But there's a lot of nuance between the communities that we serve, and we really have to like take our individual communities and learn how to adapt to it. And for us, for JTCC, it's learning how to adapt these surveys for students who are younger and who are in low income communities. And I think really like bouncing those ideas off of each other of like how we can do that makes that overall difference.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. These are great. I appreciate you guys being open and fully engaged. It's this is amazing. So next question, particularly for thinking of Breakthrough and then Chicago Lions, what was a standout moment for you during the program, whether it was a breakthrough with a young person at your organization, or a particular training session that we had, or a connection made with another organization in the PBA? And then how did that show up when conducting the CNA and then the CA?
I can start. So for me, it was training session 3 when we talked about conflict and the peace theory. That was kind of like what stood out for me. And just learning about how like, conflict is natural and is like needed, where conflict doesn't equal violence. And that showed up in like my work, like a real experience, like, during one of our basketball programs. We had practice going on and we had, 2 youth who kind of started arguing, and it wasn't violent. It was the conflict that was needed. But I had like a staff member who approached them, and they was trying to like diffuse, like de-escalate the situation, instead of like more so like encouraging the conflict to like continue, because it was like healthy conflict needed between the two individual. So that's just something, that's just how it showed up like in my day-to-day like work experience. Just that conflict and just identifying the difference between conflict and violence, but also sharing that knowledge with like those who I work closely with.
And building off of that, when I first came to PBA, I kept trying to identify if there was conflict, and learning that for a healthy organization you have to have conflict. It doesn't have to be negative conflict, but you have to have different sides coming together to build your programming. And one of the issues that my young people run into regularly is that we compete against a lot of suburban teams. The biggest difference in rugby is that after we compete, we leave it on the field and then we go and sit down and have a meal together. And what I found was at the beginning of the season, where we're very much encouraging these young people who come from other sports where you don't speak to your opponents after a game. And they would go out, they would play hard against each other, things would be said on the field, everybody would be a little hot-tempered after the game, and getting them to sit down and share a meal and actually communicate and talk with the people from the other teams. It's a lot of work for my staff to do, but as the year has gone on, by the end of the year, they're joking around with people who they've been totally hot-headed with on the field, and making really amazing connections and friendships, where if they go off to play at a higher level, these are the people that they're playing with. And watching those friendships form, just between kids who would never have come in contact with one another had it not been for the sport that we play, and that they're hanging out together outside of rugby now. And it is absolutely amazing to watch how the conflict on our fields has now reduced off of the field. And we're still working on it. There's still going to be games that, the kids aren't going to want to hang out with the other team because it was a, highly contended match, but that they're growing to understand that you might not always get along, but that everybody has some similarities and a common base of a sport to build a friendship is an amazing first step for our young people, in all of our cities.
Yeah, no, thank you all for sharing. Something I wanted to highlight, I think is super interesting, and I don't know if anyone else has noticed how every organization on this call has identified conflict as being necessary and sort of a needed thing to sort of grow in certain aspects. So I love that approach where it's super important and necessary to name that conflict is not a bad thing. It's sort of what we've been taught to sort of diffuse it immediately, but going through is a lot more impactful. So yeah, it's just great. I think that everyone is sort of touching on that. So yeah, next question. This is kind of open to anybody. Can you share a personal story about how your involvement in the Peacebuilding Academy changed your perspective using sport for conflict transformation and working with youth? And this is sort of an interesting question because this is already some of the work that you've already been doing using sport to address needs. But yeah, this specifically.
I can touch on that with an experience that I had this summer. Part of our program goes out to other youth centers and runs programming with them. And one of the programs that I was working with is teaching juniors and seniors in high school how to be teachers and leaders and camp counselors with another organization here in Chicago. And we had put on a one-day camp, and kids came in from a couple of different organizations, including a couple daycares. And we had one young person who was having some really big feelings and, went to physically take them out on another person. And we stopped for a second and sat down and had a conversation of, how you can use what you're doing to express yourself instead of your hands. If you're frustrated with a teammate, if you're frustrated with a friend. And I actually sat down with their teacher later and had the conversation of a organized sport would be very good for this young person. Here is my card, have their parents contact me. And the teacher looked at me and goes, I don't understand why he didn't react to you the same way he reacts to any other authority figure. And my explanation was, I'm not an authority figure to this kid. I just told them how they could use the sport to let their feelings out. And those big feelings, came down, and he was able to finish out the rest of the day, where I guess normally he would just be told to sit out. And understanding that the conflict he was having was not necessarily with anybody else, but with himself, and not understanding how to control his feelings until somebody kind of gave him a guide. And being able to give that guide and use the activities that we were doing to help him harness those feelings was just something amazing to see. And the teacher was just astounded that that reaction came out of that child, because usually he gets violent with the teachers also.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was having some connection issues.
Oh yeah, you're good. Can you share a personal story about how your involvement in Peacebuilding Academy has changed your perspective using sport for conflict transformation and working with youth?
This is Glenda, so Kid Soar. So just looking back on how we were able to identify the types of violence and conflict, and really utilizing that with what I mentioned for the language. I actually had a mother who speaks both Spanish and English, but her son Frankie has been a part of our program for a long time, and she actually got really excited that we were translating everything to Spanish starting this year. And she invited me to come to some of the community gatherings that she was having that were only for Spanish speaking families that had children with disabilities. So just showing that we were taking that first step, she started to, I think it built trust, right? So she started inviting us to some of her own community events where we could really start engaging with some of the kids that we hadn't reached yet. So yeah, I thought that was a great personal example. I think she has personally invited 2 new family members to some of our sports clinics, and they've come this year. So baby steps, but it is working.
Amazing. All right. Well, I guess I could, if no one else wants to try on that question, I can move to the next question. So was there a particular insight or idea, or no, sorry, that I'm missing this question. How has this program shaped your future aspirations for peace building in your community? And what outcomes do you anticipate after implementing your plans developed during the Peacebuilding Academy? And this is sort of one of those questions that sort of, again, is just adding to all your already existing work, but thinking about ways that it shows up differently in the approaches.
I can go. This is Kiera Johnson. I am the one of the many staff members. So Kids Soar. This program is basically opened my eyes. This is like one of my first jobs out of college, and I'm always looking to grow and improve, no matter what. Even in my data, I want to make it more ethical and to make sure I represent everyone well, and this is just a growing experience for me, and definitely just going out there and just growing every day, and I learned a lot of new things, and it's a great time.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for sharing. Ava, I just got your question. Yes, I will post this question in the chat. Sorry, I just have to copy and paste it. Anybody, sorry, while I put this into the chat, does anybody else want to answer that question as well?
I think also just knowing that there are always personal, like you were talking, relational, cultural, structural, there's always something else, and not to take conflict personally, but to approach it as there must be something personal to that conflict and that person that's going on. So I think just changing the lens, like you're saying, around how you look at conflict is just so important for myself to go forward in life too.
Yeah. And there's the question in the chat. It's a bit wordy, so yeah, I definitely need some more context. Oh, go ahead, David. Did you want to share? Yeah, okay, cool. For the sake of time, we are going to ask one last question, and then we'll move into the bigger conversation with the rest of the folks who are attending the meeting. So last question is, what was the biggest takeaway from the Peacebuilding Academy, and also what was the most challenging aspect of the Peacebuilding Academy in being a member?
I think for personally, the the hardest part was just the time commitment, just because it seems like we're all coming from small nonprofits, and I'm sure we all have to play a lot of different roles within our nonprofit. So just trying to figure out the time management was the biggest hurdle for me.
Definitely want to bounce off of that time commitment. For us especially, we were in the middle of like spring was our busiest season, so we had a lot of events going on, so time and just committing so many hours on certain days.
Yeah, but it's definitely necessary, and I think professional development in general is something that our organization has tried to focus on more in the last few years too.
I would say for me, it was just like the schedule, the time before submitting an application to be a part of this. My schedule, my role kind of changed like going into this program. So I was like taking on more responsibility and just supervising more staff now. So my role changed like before joining. But my biggest takeaway from being a part of this is just the sharing and learning calls. I really enjoyed those and just hearing from other organizations and what they're doing.
I think for me, the biggest challenge was feeling like I would misrepresent people that we're taking surveys of or getting information from. And I think that was my biggest fear, is that I felt like, and my biggest challenge is that that second guessing myself and always feeling like I just want to clarify as many times as possible so that I'm best representing the people that we work with. And I think the thing that I enjoyed most was that clarity that I gained through that, but also through the trainings that I felt like I gained a vocabulary for things that we had already been doing, but it allowed me to have words to describe what we were doing. And I felt like that was super helpful for me.
Very cool. Unless anybody else wants to share, I'll wait a few seconds. All right, so now we'll move into the bigger conversation with and opening it up to questions to the larger group. So Lindsay just posted a message in the chat, so we'd love to hear your comments, any thoughts you have, any questions, and then also I'll post a larger question for everybody who's attending right now. After hearing everything and hearing the cohort talk, the two cohorts talk, what do you think are the benefits of using sport for peace building? And I'll put that in the chat here. Also, though, thank you to our panelists because that was amazing. Thank you for all those, all that wisdom and like good convo. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to quickly say to just to talk a little bit about this question as well. So I've been here at GFP USA for about a year, and the idea of using sport as a tool for peace building is something that's very new to me. So even also being in the PBA, I was also learning a lot as well, and learning how like addressing something like a theory of change and using sport to address the things identified is super beneficial and impactful. So yeah, it was something that I wasn't super familiar with, but it is. I think it's something that is actually really great and is can create a lot of change for a lot of different communities and folks.
Hi, this is Tamar Datan, she, hers. And one of the themes that I heard that really would love to hear additional comments on, but really resonated is the idea that, conflict can be constructive because and shouldn't be avoided because there's a reason behind it, right? And so getting to that sort of underlying reason and helping to, not just to avoid conflict, but to let the conflict sort of open up a dialogue and an understanding about what the stressors are, the tension is that's creating that conflict. So would love to hear, just any other specific stories about that, and sort of the idea that conflict can be used as a tool to get into, get to underlying issues.
I can go if nobody else has an answer yet. But I know on certain Fridays, me and D'Angelo, we're at Breakthrough. We have home court, and that's a lot of community members and a lot of kids come to play basketball. And we often have like I believe it's like 8 to 10, 11 to 13, and then a 14 through 18-year-old group that plays. Like it could be 5-on-5 or 3-on-3, depending on the numbers that show up. But usually for us, like basketball can be sort of cathartic in a way where it kind of relieves a lot of stress. But it also, oh, I'm sorry, someone's mic is on. Sorry. But it also can be kind of stressful for some of our kids who might have issue with the skill gap, or are just now getting into the game, and they see that there's a lot of people that are better than them. But I think that it's important to like have conflict in those moments, whether it be between like a player and a ref, a player and a player and a coach, just because it gives you a chance to kind of communicate like what's going on wrong, um, what they can do better, what you yourself can be doing better. And it promotes room for growth, in my opinion, just because in those high stress scenarios, it's kind of like, you get a chance to better yourself for like the kids' sake, at least, and the kids get a chance to, get some experience as well. So when we have conflict in those different areas, I definitely promote it because it kind of intensifies the space that we're in a good way, because it shows them, if you want to stay on this path and keep playing this sport, this is the type of environment that it will be in. So I think that it is helpful to kind of introduce it to them now, because they kind of get a feel for what they do and don't want to do. And for some students and some players who like really, really thrive in those intense situations and really thrive from like the electricity from a crowd, or how loud it is in a place. Some people really like that pressure. And I think that conflict like that can make them better.
I don't know if people saw Lindsay's question in the chat. So to our colleagues in Jordan, how does this resonate with you think sport for peace? Not in this context, but in Jordan. I would be interested to hear some more from that too. All right. We can move on then. No worries at all. Thank you for all the great conversation. If there's anything anyone wants to talk about with the next couple of minutes, just let me know in the chat. And then we can pause and sort of complete that. But yeah, if no one has any other insights or any thoughts, we can move on to the next thing.
Drew, are you going to take us through this last slide?
Yes, I don't see the slide.
shifted is, do other people see evaluation poll and closing? All right, I got a thumbs up from Tamar, so let's roll with it.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. So yeah, thank you to everybody for sharing any insights and from audience for posing some questions. So we'll be launching a call for applications in 2025 for the Peacebuilding Academy. For the 2025 Peacebuilding Academy this fall in November is when we'll be launching applications. So if you're interested, please let us know. We'd love for folks to join for the 2025 cohort. Please join our mailing list as well. I'd be the first to receive information. There's a QR code on the screen to join. And we'll also be putting a link in the chat, or Lindsay has already put a link in the chat. So before we close, there's also the simple evaluation survey, just to help us gather some more feedback. So please take 1.5 to 2 minutes to finish it before heading out. And here it is right now. So just take a little bit of time, about 1.5 minutes until we to finish that. It is really quick as well.
Drew, question. Did you want the organizations that were on the panel to fill out the survey as well?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. It's up to you. No pressure to do it. But yeah, if you feel like it, that's fine too.
Thank you.
We'll give it like 30 more seconds. I see some more still coming in. Thank you. This just helps us to learn and improve for next time. And don't go quite yet. There's one more thing we're going to say. So hang on. If you fill out your survey, just hold on another 2 minutes with us, please. Is anyone still filling out the survey? I don't want to close it on you if you're in the middle of typing as a response. All right, I think I'm going to end this now. If you didn't get a chance to write a feedback, you can always send it to me in the chat. But I'll end this now and back over to Drew.
All right, cool. So yeah, this concludes our event. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you attending, and a special shout out to our partners for coming in the PPA cohort as well and sharing their insights. We'll send up a follow-up email this week to everyone who registered with the link and with the recording as well, or through the link with the recording. And yeah, we just wanted to again thank the 2024 cohort from DC and Chicago. So from Chicago, Breakthrough Urban Ministry, Chicago Adventure Therapy, and Chicago Lions, thank you all. And from DC, Junior Tennis Champion Center and So Kids Soar. And then another shout out to our partners, Laureus USA, Fight for Children, Generations for Peace Global. Thank you all. We could not have done this without you. There's a QR code and a link to the GFP USA website and our contact info. My email is also here if you have any questions about the Peacebuilding Academy. And yeah, just thank you again to our cohort. You guys are amazing. Thank you for helping us learn as well. It was really valuable, and we really appreciate all of your time and your commitment to the program. So yeah, thank you everybody, and thank you for coming, and we will hopefully be in contact soon.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Well
Thank you.
done, Drew. Thank you, Drew, for leading us
Yeah.
through this process.